Good morning. Good morning. Excuse me. Good morning, everybody. So today I'm kind of going to read two sections of scripture. Uh, I call this one disciplined and not reprimand. Um, this concerns the story of the sons of Eli and what they did, and the lack of action that Eli himself did to correct a great sin against the Lord. So let me go ahead and start reading the scripture. The first part will be First Samuel um, 2 12 through 17. And then the second part is going to be First Samuel 2 22 through 25. So let me go ahead and read those first. Now the sons of Eli were worthless men. They did not know the Lord and the custom of the priests with the people. When any man was offering a sacrifice, the priest's servant would come while the meat was boiling and with a three-pronged fork in his hand. Then he would thrust it into the pan or kettle and cauldron or pot. All that the fork brought up, the priest would take for himself. Thus they did in Shiloh to all the Israelites who came there. Also, before they burned the fat, the priest's servant would come and say to the man who was sacrificing, Give Give the priest meat for roasting, as he will not take it boiled meat from you, only raw. If the man said to him, They must surely burn the fat first, and then take as much as you desire, then he would say, No, you shall give it to me now, and if not, I will take it by force. Thus the sin of the young men was very great before the Lord, for the men despised the offering of the Lord. Okay, and now we're going to go for 22 through 25. Now Eli was very old, and he heard all that his sons were doing to all Israel, and how they lay with the women who served at the door of the tent of meeting. He said to them, Why do you do such evil things that I hear from all these people? No, my sons, for the report is not good which I hear from the Lord's people circulating. If one man sins against another, God will mediate for him. But if a man sins against the Lord, who can intercede for him? But they would not listen to the voice of their father, for the Lord desired to put them to death. All right. So Eli's two sons are religious leaders, are priests um, for Israel. They serve in the temple, but they didn't know the Lord. They didn't try to follow the Lord. They used their stature for their own gains. Somebody would, when somebody was, they would take the Lord's sacrifice for themselves. They would prevent somebody from worshiping the Lord in the manner that the Lord wanted by taking their sacrifice before it was even burnt from them. And if the person wasn't willing to do it, then they threatened violence against the person, and said, "We'll take it from you by force if you don't give it to me." So um, they were not about serving the Lord at all. They were about serving themselves. Uh, they didn't honor or love the Lord in any way. And like I said, they used their statue in the community for their own means. And you see this also starting in verse 22. Not only are they stealing people's sacrifices to eat for themselves and not giving it to the Lord, blocking people from worshiping the Lord, but turns out they're also having affairs with the women who are serving in the church as well. So we're talking total disregard for the Lord, no reverence for him whatsoever, and no reverence for the position that they've been placed in through their you know through their family. So Eli is hearing all this, and instead of removing them from the church and being Old Testament times actually probably having them put to death, he just talks to them. And that's because uh, I believe it's because it's his sons. And so he allowed his love for his sons to override his love for God, for the Lord. Because he just talks to them, he just reprimands them. And, you know, and it says, but they would not listen to the voice of their father, for the Lord desired to put them to death. So their hearts were already hardened against the Lord. And so, by all accounts, Eli should have put them to death for the actions that they have committed against God, bar none. Contextually back in their Old Testament times, bar none. They should have been put to death, and Eli should have had that happen, but he didn't. And in the end result, all three of them end up dying. Both brothers died together, and then Eli ends up dying when he finds out that both of his sons were killed. I think they were killed in a battle somewhere. But anyways, when Eli heard of the news, he as well died. He ended up falling and breaking his neck. I think he was like reclining back in a chair or something. Um, so, so you got two men who are in positions of religious leadership, abusing that power, and you got a father who's turning a blind eye, more or less, in my opinion, to what they were doing. So the biggest problem with that is, one, these brothers were, you know, preventing those who truly wanted to worship God uh, in the way that God intended for worship. And two, for those who didn't protest, they obviously didn't see anything wrong with what the sons were doing. So they were leading the people away from God on top of that. So what does this have to do with us today? We need to keep our eyes open. And when we see, leadership within the church doing things that are not, excuse me, that are not of the will of God, we need to take action. We need to discipline them. And if that means removing them from office, from their service, then that's what we need to do. And honestly, it doesn't matter if they're uh, a relation to you or not, because the bottom line is we cannot have religious leaders who are going to do what they want to do and not what the Lord wants to do. We got to watch out for those leaders who are in it for themselves. This is where these are the false prophets. They're in it for whatever reasons, for fame, for glory, for money. They don't have the Lord's interests on the forefront. They have their own interests on the forefront, and they're using God to manipulate people to get what they want. And those kind of leaders have to be removed from the church, because all they're doing is they are leading people away from God, from Christ. But not only that, they're preventing people from being able to reach Christ in some cases. So, you know, talk on the go so far. Sometimes you have to take action, and sometimes you have to do the hard thing and do the disciplining. And that doesn't matter if they're family members or not, as in the case with Eli and his sons. Because, like I said, the end result is the sons were killed in battle, I believe, if I remember right. And Eli, he died as a result of his failure to do the right thing, which would have been to remove his sons from the church service, maybe even possibly have them stoned. Going back to contextual time frame of the time they were living in. So, anyways, um, you guys have a blessed day. Love you guys, and see you tomorrow. Bye.